I often think my job as leader is basically just to help people connect the dots and give them that context so that they can do their best work. It's never quite that easy. I wish it was. It often takes quite a lot of dialogue, but that's a big part of the gig.
Now we're in build phase. So now the technology team are all sitting there. They might be in a scrum or a squad or whatever it is. And René's just told them, you got to do it my way or the highway. So we've let's say we put some structure around how we like them to approach their work, right? And now these product people in our last conversation are telling them what to do. How do you get the team positioned to receive that, to listen to an external part of the team who they might not feel is part of their team? How does that work? How do you receive product management into the squad?
We on this app, you can imagine it was crazy. Everyone we'd get requirements coming in from the Today program. It would be and then your backlog would change. And the next thing you know, Boris has got an idea.
Did he call you at 3 o'clock in the morning with ideas? Tell me.
Not personally, no, but no, he wasn't. No, but I think what's important is that your agile methodology, your ways of working, you push out into the organisation. Those policy teams were used to coming up with a policy idea, testing it out over 6 months, a year, and then turning that into a plan and then passing it on, through an RFP process usually. And we had to turn that into, idea, build, deliver in 7 days. And so actually getting your in our case, the policy team, but your product team, your business, to actually buy into agile ways of working, to buy into, a continuous discovery process where and to talk to the engineers. We had very constructive conversations between, the mobile engineers, the data engineers, and the policy people, where we could actually negotiate constraints. I need the app to lock down everyone immediately on a click of a button. That can't be done. That's a technical challenge, and we balance that out. But you can do that quickly by just working very closely together. Okay. So we just set up structures in which that would.
All right. That sounds like there was a bit of needs must going on, but everybody came to the party, so that's great. Bruno, is that the same experience for you? Are you finding, again, the breadth of sort of different sizes of companies that you work with? Or what's the key? How do you get the engineers keyed into the mission?
So the mission of the company, hopefully everyone buys into to join.
Has that always worked everywhere you've been? Everybody just buys into it?
Not really. Okay. I'm very lucky to work in some companies that have really strong missions, like Funding Circle is a financial service, but we are here to make small business to win. So the purpose is really high. In healthcare, better healthcare for all is really high, for sure. But to your point in terms of how do we include product managers or structure, I think there is something a little bit higher than that. Is the company product-led? Is the company sales-led, right? Are you in B2B or B2C? That changes the whole dynamic. And the example that Neil put here is, I have a bunch of requirements, and now I have the hard point to motivate people and teams to come with creative solutions and be highly engaged. In other areas, I work at The Zone, which is the Netflix of sports, and hypergrow. So we went from 60 people to 400 in 9 months across multiple development centers. We were really innovative and people were really behind changing the games of sports, but the requirements are quite fluid. So people were highly engaged and really trying to find the best ways to work for their teams. When I work at B2B, usually there's more commercial lens and I have similar issues. And the product managers, to be part of the challenge of project managers, many times they feel as project managers as opposed to product managers. Why? Because we're not giving them customer problems for them to solve. That then goes to the teams, and the teams have an objective and a clear mandate, and they're trying to solve the problem. We're telling them effectively what to do, almost ticking boxes. So part of the strategy is exactly what Neil brings, which is what are the things that we can bring together to make meaningful of a business that works like a feature factory, right? So requirements in, tick boxes, and go faster. So
Got
that's
it.
my 2 cents.
I think that makes sense. You mentioned about consumer facing. So Rennie and Dave, you predominantly are consumer facing, right? And the industries in which you're in, you've got engineers, and generally speaking, most engineers are a reasonable level of intelligence, right? And so they understand the market and the product that's being sold. Some of them may have been working for you for some time. And one of the things we often hear from our engineers is like, yeah, they had that idea 3 years ago and it was a stupid idea, then it's a stupid idea now, right? So I think, so how do you get the engineers to have that voice, be confident and not just bury themselves away in the corner and go, it's going to fail, I told you, how do you get them into the business, planning of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say is, and a bit like Bruno said, in some ways you want that, right? Like, I mean, the worst thing you can possibly have is engineers who just kind of sit back and do what they're asked to do and don't think about what you're trying to achieve. And I mean, actually, one of the great things about OVO and travel was typically people feel excited about the mission and they want to be part of it and so on. So, but I mean, I think to your point, you've got to make sure that there is that outlet and that people can talk it through. And that you have that dialogue, but you've also got to provide them the context so that they understand, why, maybe we tried something 3 years ago and it didn't work at that point, but it's going to work now, So I think it's really all about the context. And, I often think my job as leader is basically just to help people connect the dots and give them that context so that they can do their best work. It's never quite that easy. I wish it was. It often takes quite a lot of dialogue, but, that's a big part of the gig.
I think that's absolutely true. But Rennie, just talk to us a little bit about going the other way, right? Because sometimes these engineers are right. Sometimes they're just
they
like,
are.
it's not
They
going to
know how
bloody
it
work,
works.
and they don't get that upwards voice. So how do you facilitate that?
So there's a few things to unpack in there. One is we sometimes still work in organizations that think technology is an agency and it's their job to execute and not to engage in solution. And I find, and I haven't always had the coziest relationship with product management, because too often people are excited about solutioning, and that is really dangerous. And instead, describe to me what is it that we are trying to make happen, and let's get, like I always say that when I joined at Compare the Market, one of the things that was really clear to me is that we had 400 people who knew exactly how our products worked. I mean, exactly. And if we don't engage them in how do we make this better, like beyond optimization, so we're going through quite a lot of transformation at the moment. And what we weren't going to do is to have a bunch of product people sitting in a room by themselves designing, because we would over-engineer, we would get past value. And we start with a really simple equation. Show me the value, and then we'll continue to iterate, which we don't do as engineers too often, right? Because of projects, not products. And then we can iterate to value and stop, which almost never freaking happens. And so it's like engaging in a different dialogue around how will we make this work better? Let's engage the people who actually know how it works, like in detail. The flip side of that in the engineering is you actually have to, I'm gonna swear, you actually have to give a fuck, right? Yep. So too often I work with engineers who don't even care enough to show up to trading meetings, or like, I work in insurance. Let me tell you something, honey. I didn't wake up one day and say, you know what I really wanna do? I wanna sell insurance, right? But I have to care enough about that product to be able to bring the energy around how do we make it better for our customers. So we are lucky because we have a really strong purpose. We don't make money unless we can save people money, period. Right? Nobody would trade with us unless we can save them money. We're also a B2B business. So we can't attract partners unless we can bring them better customers. Right? So it's a virtuous circle, but it brings a lot of purpose to people showing up and doing their best work. But you gotta allow them they have to feel empowered to participate. They have to feel like it's their job to participate. I'm like, please don't let dumb decisions get made in meetings you were in. I hold my team to quite high standard on that, going, shit does not happen around you. You're a part of this company. We are the business. So if you're not going to say no in a way that people heard you, when dumb things are getting decided, that's on you, right? Not on them. And then the flip side is like work with your product people to help educate them. Guys, they want to do a good job. They want to, right? And too often we go, oh, you'll never understand. I'm just not going to explain it to you, right? It's like, no, educate them so that they can be engaged in recognizing that those people in the room are going to help them get there.
It's a really valid point about having that voice and speaking up. But so many engineers are uncomfortable doing that, right? And sometimes it only takes one chance. And I remember a particular point in my career where a product director we made a small mistake. I'm not saying who. We'd made a small mistake with releasing an app, little technical error. It was 6 o'clock in the morning, and we were on to Apple to try and fix that mistake. And the product director was screaming in my face. And I said, this is what we're going to do. And I was more junior then, but I'm standing up to him saying, this is what we're going to do. He said, that's not acceptable, I want to do this. And I said, no, this is the right technical thing to do. This is our domain word. And he said, I want to talk to your boss. And I went, go on then. And my boss, he phoned up my boss, spoke to my boss, and my boss said, do whatever David tells you to do, right? And that little bit of support from us as leaders is so valuable to the engineers and the people coming through to know that if they say something that's controversial and stand up to strong other people in the company, then it can work and your boss has got your back.
David, I managed to, and this works sometimes when you're a woman, I managed to make peace with one of my product people who thought that they were in charge. In that, let's think of the product as our baby, right? And he was a parent, and I'm like, so there is no way I can believe that you're in charge of your children and that your wife doesn't have a say in how they're raised and what happens. So it's like, I know you care about this baby. I know it's your baby and you care about it, and you throw yourself in front of it. So would I.
Yeah.
Right. So if we can both agree that it's our baby, then let's define like the decisions you get to make and the decisions I get to make. And I had a product owner once suggest to me that we could take a customer-facing product live with no resilience.
Right.
And I said no. And he said, no, I'll take the risk. And I said, you can't because it's my risk.
Yeah.
And when I go to my boss, when it falls over in the middle of the night and there's no fucking news, he's going to go, what happened? And I'll go, oh, Dave said it was okay. That would just not work, right?
Yeah. No, it's a very tough world. Bruno?
Yeah, I agree with everything. In my philosophy is there is no engineering without product, and there is no product without engineering. We're not two teams, we are one team. And that really catalyzes what I call product love. And how do you make product love, which is going above and beyond customer expectations? It's moving away from delivery too much and really focus on the outcomes. That's why teams need to have, and when I say teams, I mean product engineering and all the cross-functional ones, they need to share the same KPIs, the same data, right?
Yeah.
There is that common objective.
I think that's really true, and maybe in some of the larger companies, people start to get quite focused on OKRs, objectives, and all that kind of stuff. I always insist on having at least one really called out shared objective, and big in bold shared objective between product and technology. I think that's really important.